Before Snapped became one of the longest-running true crime series in television history, launching a true crime phenomenon, one case started it all. A respected doctor and his alluring wife are living large in the heart of Dixie.
They had money, the nice cars, the furs, the jewelry.
This doctor's worth a little in excess of $6 million.
Until their home becomes the scene of unspeakable horror.
Do you know if the person that hurt him is still inside? I don't know. I've got this.
There was a bat next to him with blood all over it.
That's called overkill.
Investigators are at a loss until a tip reveals a devious plot.
This informant says, I heard this guy say he was going to murder a doctor in Huntsville. He wanted $5,000 for the hit.
Twin sisters get caught at the center of the investigation.
They're fraternal twins. They're each other's best friend.
She saw her sister in a predicament that was very unpleasant.
What would it take to make them snap?
One is either walking around free and should not be, or one is sitting in prison and should be free herself. You can't have both.
Boulder Circle is one of Huntsville, Alabama's most exclusive neighborhoods.
This particular section of town, they called Pill Hill because all the doctors were building houses.
The homes are virtually mansions. It's the kind of thing you expect when you're rolling through someplace like, say, Bel Air or Beverly Hills.
On Friday, May 22nd, 1992 at 9:30 p.m., a rare 911 call comes in from the upscale neighborhood. 46-year-old Betty Wilson is on the line.
When Betty called 911, she was completely freaked out. Something terrible had happened.
Listen, this is the police department. Talk to me, okay? Were you in the house or did you walk in the house? Walk in the house. Okay, you come home and you walked in the house and you saw this person laying on the floor. Who is the person to you?
Betty says she thinks 55-year-old Jack Wilson has been attacked.
She says she saw Jack lying in a pool of blood. She freaked out and ran to a neighbor's house.
Do you know if the person that hurt him is still inside? I don't know. I've got this. Okay, we've got an ambulance and we've got the police on the way.
I was on second shift that night, and I was actually had responded to a call in the neighborhood, probably about 6 blocks from that house. So I responded quickly. I secured the whole house, the whole yard, everything.
Seeing no sign of an attacker, officers locate Jack inside.
The landing at the top of the stairwell is where Mr. Wilson was. He was laying on his back. There was blood all over the floor and then blood splatter on the wall.
It's clear he's been beaten. He has a lot of wounds. Both of his arms were fractured. They're looking around for clues to exactly what happened in this space, in this hallway. Was someone waiting for him in the house? It's just really not clear. These are all things that detectives are going to try to put together as they move forward with their investigation.
Jack Ray Wilson was born in Chicago in 1937 and raised by adoptive parents. He grew up with poor eyesight, so as an adult, he focused on helping others who struggled with the same.
Jack Wilson was an ophthalmologist. Everybody loved Dr. Wilson because he was an eccentric character, funny, kind, and he often did surgeries for free.
People talk nonstop about what a great doctor he was, what a kind person he was.
Though he was beloved in his professional life, Jack's private life was more complicated.
He married early, and they had 3 children, and they divorced. Jack Wilson's previous wife had custody of the children, but they had a great relationship with their father.
Quietly healing from his broken heart, in 1976, Jack met an attractive young nurse named Betty.
Jack and Betty met at a hospital. She has that sort of indescribable Southern charm that Southern ladies oftentimes have. That honey accent, that sweet expression.
Betty Woods was born in 1945 in Gadsden, Alabama, coming into the world alongside her twin sister, Peggy.
Their daddy was a detective, perhaps on the Gadsden police force, but he was in law enforcement. It seemed to be a normal family.
They're fraternal twins, but they're each other's best friend.
In high school, differences began to emerge.
Peggy was perceived as the debutante. She excelled. She was a homecoming queen. Betty was more average, but they always appeared to get along just fine.
Betty was always the quiet one and always the one in her sister's shadow.
In 1964, Betty married, but the relationship seemed doomed from the start.
Betty married her high school sweetheart, and they never really had terrible issues. They just married too young. They had children quickly and then divorced not very long after the kids were born. When Betty divorced her husband, Betty moved to Huntsville and got some odd jobs just to pay the bills. That is when Betty Wilson sort of came into her own. She shared the custody and had the kids when she could, but not like a full-time mother.
She was able to go on to college when she was able to move to a bigger city where people tend to accept a little bit more women who are a little bit different.
Free from her unhappy marriage, Betty forged a new path.
Betty decided then that nursing is what she really wanted to do. Went back to nursing school, got her nursing degree. She was working in kidney dialysis at the hospital, is how she met Jack Wilson. And he instantly fell for her.
Back in Huntsville, Betty and Jack's romance developed at lightning speed.
They literally had been on 2 dates before moving in together.
2 years into their relationship, the respected doctor at 41 years old found himself in need of medical care.
Jack was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and he had to have surgery. And the surgery left him needing an ostomy bag.
Betty is a caretaker by nature. She wanted to take care of him, and she did take good care of him.
Not long after his surgery, Betty and Jack said "I do" in 1978.
They were married, and she had acquired a whole new stature, and that she no longer was just a nurse, she was a doctor's wife.
I thought she had a wonderful life, and the man she was married to was a wonderful man. She always seemed to be really happy.
Meanwhile, Peggy was also leading a wholesome married life just a few hours away from her sister in Vincent, Alabama.
Peggy contributes to the community. She's a grammar school teacher. She is the wife of a preacher. She had a total of 3 kids. Even though they had a little different window on the world, Betty and Peggy were still as close as they ever were.
Soon after Betty and Jack tied the knot, Jack's professional life started to flourish.
It wasn't long before Jack made a lot of money. She quit working and became a full-time doctor's wife. They had a big house, they had the nice cars, she had the furs, they had the jewelry.
But behind closed doors, Betty struggled with the expectations of being the wife of a high-profile doctor.
I think in Betty's case, she turned to alcohol because it offers this feeling of being disinhibited, of doing things that you normally wouldn't do.
When she had to be put in social situations, Betty often drank just to get through.
She couldn't stop drinking all the time, but she was drinking herself into oblivion. Jack didn't like to be around her. Then, at some point, she realized that if she was going to maintain her relationship, she needed to stop drinking.
8 years into their marriage, Jack supported his wife in her recovery just as Betty had supported him.
Betty was very, very, very involved in AA. When she quit drinking, she quit drinking. And with the alcohol gone, Betty did become Betty again.
But on May 22nd, Jack and Betty's charmed life takes a tragic turn when she finds him dead in their upscale home.
When the detectives get to the scene, they're seeing Jack on the floor in a pool of blood, and it's hard to discern individual wounds.
Investigators spot a disturbing clue near Jack's body.
There's a 34-inch aluminum baseball bat near Jack's body on the floor.
There was a bat next to him with blood all over it. It looked like Dr. Wilson was beaten to death with the baseball bat.
The bat is taken to be examined for prints. As technicians continue to process the scene, investigators speak with neighbors. A young boy reports seeing Dr. Wilson at 4:30 p.m., about 5 hours before he was found dead.
Dr. Wilson come in the house and got a baseball bat, and he went outside and was out there driving up a sign in the yard, and he had a baseball bat doing that. He then goes back into the house, and he has the baseball bat still in his hand.
Witness statements lead investigators to believe Jack was killed between 4:30 and 9 p.m. Equipped with a narrowed time frame and a potential murder weapon, police start their investigation close to home.
There was not one piece of evidence by itself to determine who was involved in this crime. Now, our job is not to go out and find somebody guilty. Our job is to go out and find the truth.
Coming up, police dig into the Wilsons' past.
Now, I've heard all kinds of stuff around town. People talk.
And unearth a twisted detail that reveals a slew of suspects.
They mutually agreed to have an open marriage.
After finding her husband inside their lavish Huntsville home, brutally beaten to death, Betty Wilson seeks refuge at a neighbor's while police arrive on scene. She's soon joined by her twin sister, Peggy.
Peggy rushed as soon as she heard Jack was dead. She drives the 2 hours to get immediately to Betty's side.
She was just traumatized by finding him the way she did.
At this point, she was really not in any condition to answer questions.
At the crime scene, investigators look for evidence that could support the theory of a burglary gone wrong.
Everybody knew they had money. It looked like somebody was there to burglarize the home, and Dr. Wilson just happened to walk in on the burglar.
His wallet is on the floor. It's open. There's no cash in it.
This was a big home, and it had lots of valuable stuff in it.
A closer look shows that most of those valuable items are still there.
There were several items left out. I mean, I've been to houses, several hundreds of houses that have been broken into and been ransacked, and this house hadn't.
Ruling out potential burglary, investigators must consider if it was personal.
It was a very gruesome murder. He was bludgeoned to death, and he was also stabbed multiple times. It was obviously somebody who had something against the person they killed because of the brutality.
Due to the lack of evidence at the scene and the brutal nature of the attack, investigators hope the autopsy will provide some much-needed insight.
There were multiple blunt force injuries. He was struck a great number of times over almost the entire circumference of his head. This was clearly more than would have been necessary to cause his death. That's called overkill.
The medical examiner reports that there are also 2 stab wounds to Jack's chest.
The forensic examiner was not able to determine whether he died from the multiple blunt force trauma or from the stabs themselves, but probably died from a combination of the 2.
Now, overkill types of homicides are often seen in situations where there's some type of an intense emotional relationship between people who might have been emotionally attached or entangled with Dr. Wilson.
While waiting to interview Betty, investigators speak with those who knew the Wilsons. They learn that while Jack was adored amongst their social circle, Betty was a constant source of gossip.
She was a very fun person, outgoing personality. Now, I've heard all kinds of stuff around town, you know, of affairs and stuff like that. I was never aware of any of that going on, but, you know, people talk.
Betty flaunted herself. She didn't try to hide what she was. She went out, she had fun, she had affairs. I think reputation counts for a lot in a small town like that.
Investigators also learn that Betty had a unique method of landing her lovers.
AA was a big, big part of Betty's life, and she had been sober for 5 years. She was very involved, attended meetings all of the time.
In those meetings, she would pick up men and entertain them.
Armed with new information, detectives are ready to question Betty. Within 48 hours, she has calmed down enough for an interview.
Betty was asked to come in and make a formal statement to police about what she found.
Betty is still clearly distraught, but she is cooperating.
Investigators start by having Betty walk them through the day of Jack's murder. Betty tells them she had spent the day preparing for an upcoming trip to New Mexico.
They were leaving early the next morning, and they were both really excited about that trip. Betty had been to Parkway Place Mall shopping. She bought these bright, flowery shoes. Police also saw those shoes that Betty had on. She had receipts and showed time stamps pretty much throughout the entire day. Her alibi was ironclad.
And then, as is her custom, she goes to an AA meeting later in the day, and she doesn't arrive home until about 9:30. She goes into the house. When she got to the top of the stairs, this is when she sees her husband Jack on the floor.
Knowing rumors surround the Wilsons' personal life, investigators begin to question her about their relationship. Betty explains that Jack's colostomy bag put an end to the couple's sex life.
That interfered with their social life and also with their sexual relations.
Betty says Jack understood that she had to have her needs met elsewhere.
Betty and Jack mutually agreed to have an open marriage. It just means that you are emotionally faithful to your significant other, but you can be physically unfaithful.
After detectives wrap up their interview with Betty, they start looking for any indication that Jack was angry or even aware of Betty's activities.
There was no evidence that I'm aware of that Jack Wilson was upset with Betty or he was seeking a divorce.
Though there is no sign of tension, investigators are not able to confirm if Jack knew about Betty's other relationships.
Knowing that there was a clear overkill aspect to Dr. Wilson's murder, it really made me question as to other people that Betty may have been romantically involved with that might have gotten angry and perhaps set out to kill him.
Despite the extensive list of Betty's flings, none raise investigators' suspicions.
We didn't pursue that. I certainly didn't want to ruin some innocent person's marriage or get involved in issues that really weren't related to the murder itself.
Then, 3 days into the investigation, Huntsville authorities learn of a disturbing tip.
There was an anonymous tip before Dr. Wilson was killed.
We received a call from Shelby County Sheriff's Department down there. They had an informant who contacted them and said there was going to be a murder here in Huntsville.
This informant heard a man by the name of James White claiming that he had been hired to kill a Huntsville doctor.
Three days into the murder investigation of Dr. Jack Wilson, investigators have just learned of a remarkable tip.
This informant contacts police and says, hey, listen, I heard this guy say he was going to murder a doctor in Huntsville. She doesn't know anything about this potential crime except she overheard someone say this.
The informant claimed James White had been hired by someone named Peggy. When the tip originally came in, authorities at the sheriff's department did not know what to do with it.
They really can't do anything because there are lots of doctors in Huntsville, and they don't even know if this is real.
But now that Jack has been killed, the tip becomes top priority.
We contacted back Shelby County, and then we got the name of who they said was a suspect down there, which was Peggy. Here we are, we got Betty Wilson up here. Her date of birth is the same as the sister in Shelby County. And that's how the connection began at that time.
Uncertain of Peggy's involvement, investigators head south to James White's reported location, deciding to take their chances with the alleged hitman first.
We found him at a little restaurant down there and told him that we needed to talk to him about the homicide. And then he voluntarily interviewed.
James White was a Vietnam vet who had severe PTSD. He was also a known drug user, felon. He had a sordid past, to say the least.
For hours, James denies any involvement in the murder.
Because they were getting nowhere. Finally, I called and asked the sheriff. I said, if you'll bring James tonight something to eat and drink, I'd appreciate it. I tell James I'm going to thank the Lord for my food before I eat it. I'm going to say a prayer. And James told me, he said, Mickey, if you do that, would you please pray for me also? So I said prayer for us at the meal. And that's when he began to reveal his involvement in the case.
James says he met Peggy Lowe 1 year prior.
Peggy taught first grade in the town where James White lived. He was a carpenter, and she needed some cabinets built.
He says that he and Peggy became friends.
Peggy really felt sorry for him because of what she knew her own twin sister had gone through with addiction. He would call her and tell her that he was going to kill himself, and she would talk him off a ledge.
He looks at Peggy as being helpful and kind, and he develops this crush on her.
Peggy began befriending him. Then it eased in to the point that I've got a sister who's miserable. You know, her husband is sick, and just on and on and on, building up James to the point of thinking, you know, what can I do for this lady?
Peggy told him that Betty's husband was abusive and, and they wanted to have him killed.
So James says he offered to kill Jack Wilson.
He wanted $5,000 for the hit. He said he'd get $2,500 up front and $2,500 when he had completed the job. It was actually Peggy who hired him. He said it was Peggy who put together the whole plot.
I think that twins and sisters feel a bond. And Peggy saw her sister in a predicament that was very unpleasant. And maybe she felt that the easier option was simply to get rid of the problem.
Then, a month before the murder, he realized Betty was in on it too, when Betty allegedly summoned James to Guntersville Park to receive his down payment.
Well, Betty Wilson was there for this Alcoholics Anonymous conference that was going on.
Betty took a children's book that just happened to be in her car, and she just stuck to, I think it was $200, down in the library book.
Puts some money in there, gives it to the guard, says, give this out to James White.
James tells investigators that it wasn't the $2,500 he'd asked for up front, but he agreed to go through with the crime with the understanding that he would be paid the rest after. Then, 2 days before the murder was to take place, he claims he met the twins at a remote location to receive the would-be murder weapon, a .38 caliber revolver.
Told us that Betty and Peggy brought it down to him. They met him at Logan Martin Dam.
According to James, his final meeting was with Betty just hours before the murder was to take place.
He meets her at Parkway City Mall. When he meets her there, she's putting on a pair of shoes, and they were a floral type shoe.
He described those shoes to the nth degree.
Investigators recognize the description.
They indeed were the shoes that Betty had on the night she found her husband's body. He says that Betty picked him up in her car and that she drove him to her house.
James claims he'd left the gun behind, taking along some rope and a knife instead.
James decided against using the gun because he thought it would make too much noise.
She says, I'll be back at a certain time. So he then goes in and he waits there in the house. Dr. Wilson gets home. He walks upstairs. Dr. Wilson, he has the baseball bat still in his hand from driving up a sign in the yard. And when he gets to the top flight of the stairs, him and James White meet face to face in the doorway. James attacks him, and Dr. Wilson is somewhat trying to defend himself, but Dr. Wilson was so small, James was able to overcome him and took the baseball bat away from him, and he beat him with it.
But James says he doesn't remember what happened next.
He said he had something on the order of 16 to 18 beers, and he's been doing drugs.
James says that before Betty called 911, she made a quick trip back to pick him up.
He then got into Betty's car, and Betty drove him off and let him out somewhere where he had his truck.
10 hours after the interrogation began, police booked James White into Huntsville City Jail. But investigators know their work is far from over.
The story that he told first to police quickly changed into another. It's hard to believe anything the man says.
James is a very shady character. In fiction, he's what you would call an unreliable narrator. You cannot trust things that he says.
coming up. Detectives zero in on motive.
She wanted it all, and she wanted it now, and she didn't want it with Dr. Wilson.
And the real culprit is revealed, unleashing a media frenzy.
It was like a circus, and everybody wanted a piece of the story.
Five days after Dr. Jack Wilson was murdered, alleged hitman James White is in custody, claiming he was hired by the victim's wife, Betty, and her twin sister, Peggy.
James, he began to tell us the things that happened, and that was my job to go out and try to corroborate.
Detectives follow up, of course, on everything in James' confession. They want to find the library book where the money was supposed to be transferred to him. If that's possible, they want to find the gun, if they can, even though he didn't really use it in the crime. That would lend credibility to his story, certainly to his confession. So they go out to search his home.
The gun, they did find he had hidden it in the floorboards in his home.
Also, they find the weapon is registered to Betty.
In James's truck, they locate another important piece of evidence.
And they find a library book, and it's checked out to Betty. And this is the book that James said, she left partial payment for me.
The book, the shoes, I mean, everything that he mentioned, his story just made sense. He got just dropped off to do the crime, and that's what he did.
There is still one question looming over the investigation. Why would the twins conspire to kill Jack?
Who benefits? Detectives always follow the money. So when they start looking into Jack's financials, what they find out is that this doctor's worth a little in excess of $6 million in property and insurance. Sole beneficiary, his wife, Betty.
Our theory was that Betty couldn't divorce Dr. Wilson because if it were proven that she were having affairs, she might have only received a minuscule part of his estate. She wanted it all, and she wanted it now, and she didn't want it with Dr. Wilson.
As far as Peggy goes, investigators learn Betty was generous with her twin.
Peggy's husband was a music director with the Baptist Church, and that's not a high-paying job. And Peggy was a teacher.
Peggy enjoyed a lavish lifestyle when she came to stay with Betty. If her sister got away with the money, that she herself would be living a high lifestyle also.
On May 27, 1992, 5 days after Jack Wilson's murder, authorities arrest Betty and Peggy. Investigators interview Betty first.
When police questioned Betty about her involvement and if she paid James White to kill her husband, she automatically, instantly said absolutely not.
Detectives tell Betty that her sister has turned on her, but Betty calls their bluff.
One detective tells Betty, your sister rolled on you. And Betty's reaction was like, no, no, that's absolutely not true. They did the same thing to Peggy. Peggy had the same reaction as Betty did. Absolutely no way.
The two women would not talk to us about it. They immediately wanted a lawyer.
Betty and Peggy are both charged with conspiracy and capital murder. The arrests make headlines throughout the state.
When they arrested Peggy and Betty, it was like a circus. Everybody wanted a piece of the story. The media kept Dr. Wilson's children out of the spotlight for obvious reasons.
Betty's trial is up first, starting on February 23, 1993, 9 months after Jack's murder.
The case was moved from Huntsville to Tuscaloosa for Betty's trial because there had been so much adverse publicity about the two sisters.
It was like a rock concert. These people came and stood in line to get in the courtroom for the entertainment value of it.
The prosecution calls their star witness.
The crux of their case was James White's detailed confession in which he implicated Betty and Peggy.
The deal that the state made with James White was if he testified against the two sisters that he would receive a life sentence and not receive the death penalty.
James admits on the stand that his memory remains fuzzy.
He had been hired by Betty Wilson and Peggy Lowe. Betty picked him up in her car. She drove him to her house.
But he said with his own testimony that he was on drugs and he was drinking heavily and he doesn't remember what happened.
The prosecution calls several witnesses who break down Betty's character, including her close friends.
They said she was mean and she said things, very hateful things, in front of other people and to Jack. She would talk about the bag, she called it, after his colostomy, that he had to wear a bag the rest of his life.
At least one fellow actually testified that he and Betty had a relationship. Well, Betty had the reputation of being someone that was just not a very faithful wife.
Betty Wilson never takes the stand in her own defense, leaving the town divided on the truth.
The jury only knew what everybody said about Betty. All there was circumstantial evidence that they put up by people who, just putting witness after witness, who disliked Betty.
Coming up, Betty learns her fate.
Some of Betty's so-called friends threw her under the bus.
And a surprise witness throws Peggy's case into turmoil.
I could tell right from the start that something else other than a bat had caused these injuries.
After 6 days of testimony, Betty Wilson's fate rests with the jury. It takes them 10 hours to reach a verdict.
The jury then deliberates for like a day or two, and she's then found guilty. She got life without parole.
I think that the prosecution won it on James' confession and Betty's lifestyle. Some of Betty's so-called friends threw her under the bus. Attorneys and prosecutors, they know how to play on the emotions of jurors. They read the room. They won the hearts and minds of the jurors.
Six months later, Betty's twin sister Peggy Lowe gets her day in court in Montgomery.
A jury coming in knew her sister had been convicted, and therefore, as everyone has said, if one of them is guilty, they must both be guilty.
But Peggy's counsel has an advantage Betty's lawyers didn't. A client with a sterling reputation.
Peggy Lowe had all of her church friends sitting in that trial. She was loved by a community.
Unlike Betty, Peggy takes the stand in her own defense.
She came through as Mrs. Clean. She was beautiful, she was sweet, and it all came through in the trial.
The defense claims James White's story is false and that he acted without the twins, but with the help of an unknown accomplice.
Her defense attorney says James White and some other degenerate criminal found out about this wealthy woman and inquired about his work schedule and was like, we're gonna go rob him then. He surprised them and they beat him in the head. I don't think they meant to kill him.
Chief Medical Examiner Chris Sperry also takes the stand, a key witness for the defense who did not appear at Betty's trial. He challenges the assumption that Jack was killed with a baseball bat.
The nature of the injuries on his head were straight with slightly jagged edges, and those injuries would be caused by something that is kind of narrow and thin. I could tell right from the start that something else other than a bat had caused these injuries.
The defense presents a new theory based on pictures from the crime scene.
Down on the ground floor, there was a fireplace, and you could see there was a poker that was missing that might have been used to kill him.
The defense also questions whether Dr. Wilson was killed where his body was found.
Where Dr. Wilson was laying on the floor, there was a little bit of blood that was maybe no more than 6 or 8 inches off of the floor onto the walls, but nothing above that. And I think that he was murdered somewhere else, and then he was brought up the stairs, and that would be difficult even for 2 people to do.
It looked like this was the act of more than one person. The defense makes it very clear that he probably wasn't the only person at that crime scene. There were 2 weapons at the very least used to kill this man.
The defense alleges that robbery is the real reason why James White came to be in possession of Betty Wilson's .38 caliber revolver.
Did he steal the gun? Did he take the gun when he murdered Dr. Wilson?
After a week of testimony, Peggy's case goes to the jury. Just 2 hours later, the verdict is in.
This time, this jury returns with a verdict of not guilty. She's acquitted.
The verdict causes almost as much of a stir as the crime itself.
One is either walking around free and should not be, or one is sitting in prison and should be free herself. You can't have both.
Though the verdicts raise controversy, the true tragedy is the loss of a beloved doctor.
Jack Wilson was a kind and caring man. Not all victims are. He was generous. He treated his patients with dignity and respect, no matter what their circumstances. And it's tragic all the way around that he's gone.
Have the internet? No. What does it do then? Well, Rodney struggled. If you forget what day it is, you can press this button and it will tell you, provided you've set the date correctly, which is quite a complex process, to be honest. The woman walked away. Shaking her head, Dell stormed over, his face redder than a ripe tomato. Rodney, what are you doing? You're not selling a funeral, you're selling the future. Look, watch the master. Dell grabbed an organizer and held it aloft. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. Are you tired of carrying around heavy books? Are you tired of losing your place in your diary? Introducing the Trotter 2000. It's used by astronauts. It's used by international spies. It's so secret that even the government doesn't want you to have won. A small crowd gathered. Those eyes sparkled. It's got a high-definition liquid crystal display. It's got a built-in alarm system to warn you of approaching birthdays. And for today only, because my brother here has just been made managing director and he's feeling generous, you can have it for a tenner. A tenner, a man shouted. I can get a real one for a $5 down at the pound shop. Ah, but does the pound shop one come with a lifetime guarantee from Trotter's Independent Traders? Dell shot back, and does it have the emergency beep function? I think not. The crowd began to disperse. Rodney sighed. Dell, it's no use. People aren't stupid. They know a piece of junk when they see one. Junk, Dell whispered, horrified. This is vintage, Rodney. It's retro. We just haven't found our target market yet. We need a specialist buyer. Like who? A museum for failed inventions. No, Dell said, a slow grin spreading across his face. I know exactly who. Boyke. Chapter 19, The Strategy Meeting. That evening, the living room of Nelson Mandela House was converted into a high-level boardroom. Rodney was sitting at the table with a notepad, trying to look professional. Raquel was in the kitchen, and the distant sound of Damien playing a video game provided a soundtrack of explosions and digital screams. Right, Rodney said, tapping his pen. Meeting of the Board of Directors. Item 1, the debt. £48,754. Item 2, assets. We have 200 broken umbrellas, 50 fake shock absorbers, and 199 electronic personal organizers. One broke when Dell sat on it. It didn't break, Dell corrected from the armchair. It just redistributed its components. It's an exploding view model. Very educational. Whatever, Rodney sighed. Dell, we need a real plan. We can't keep selling junk to the neighbors. We're going to get evicted. Dell leaned forward, his voice serious. Rodney, I've been thinking. As the managing director, you need to think big. We don't need 100 small deals. We need one huge deal. A deal that will wipe out the debt in one go. And what is this deal? Rodney asked, wary. I've been talking to a bloke called Nervous Nick. He's got a lead on a consignment of, well, it's high-tech equipment. Not more organizers? No, it's medical equipment. Laser-guided, state-of-the-art diagnostic machines. Rodney stared at him. Medical equipment. Dell, you don't know a laser from a light bulb. And where would we sell medical equipment? The private sector, Rodney. Private clinics. I've already made a few calls. I've told them we're an international consultancy specializing in healthcare procurement. You told them what? Rodney stood up, pacing. Dell, this is fraud. We're going to end up in the nick with Mike. It's not fraud. It's creative marketing. Dell shouted back. And besides, we're doing the world a favor. We're bringing down the cost of health care. We're practically saints. You're practically a lunatic, Rodney yelled. I'm the managing director, and I'm saying no. No lasers. No clinics. No nervous Nick. The room went silent. Raquel appeared at the door, a spatula in her hand. Is everything all right in here? Everything's fine, sweetheart, Del said, his voice dripping with fake calm. Rodney's just having a bit of executive stress. He'll be fine once he's had his tea. Rodney slumped back into his chair. I can't do this, Del. I'm not a businessman. I'm just Rodney. Del walked over and put a hand on his brother's shoulder. No, you're not just Rodney. You're a trotter, and trotters never give up. We'll find a way. Prove. Kushti. Chapter 20. The Ghost of Millionaires Past. Later that night, when the rest of the flat was asleep, Del stood on the balcony, looking out over the flickering lights of Peckham. The wind was cold, but he didn't feel it. He was thinking about the yacht. He was thinking about the taste of the expensive cognac and the feeling of the sun on his face in Barbados. He missed it. He missed the respect. He missed the way people looked at him when he had money in his pocket. Now, they just looked at him with pity, or worse, they didn't look at him at all. If only Mum could see us now, he whispered to the night. He remembered the promise he'd made to her on her deathbed. He'd promised to look after Rodney. He'd promised to make something of themselves. And for a while, he'd done it. He'd reached the summit, but the fall had been long and hard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the 1-pound coin from the Gold Rush show. He flipped it in the air and caught it. Heads, we're back in the money, he muttered. Tails, well, tails, we just try harder. He looked at the coin. It was tails. Del smiled. That's my boy. Always playing hard to get. He turned back into the flat, his mind already spinning with new ideas, new angles, new ways to turn the world in his favor. Because Derek Trotter wasn't just a salesman. He was a survivor. And as long as there was a deal to be made, a story to be told, and a brother to argue with, he was exactly where he belonged. Good night, Peckham, he said, closing the balcony door. Sleep well, because tomorrow the Phoenix is going to do some shopping. Chapter 21, Meeting Nervous Nick. The rendezvous point was a derelict garage in a part of Bermondsey that even the rats avoided. The air smelled of damp cardboard and secrets. Del adjusted his camel hair coat, trying to look like a high-level procurement officer rather than a man who had just spent his last tenner on petrol. Rodney followed, his eyes darting toward every shadow. Del, I really don't like this. Nervous Nick is called nervous for a reason, usually because he's about to be arrested. He's just high-strung, Rodney, Del whispered. Genius often is. A man emerged from behind a stack of rusted oil drums. He was twitching so violently that his glasses were barely staying on his nose. This was Nervous Nick. You got the money? Nick stammered, his eyes scanning the empty street. I've got the backing of a major international syndicate, Nick, Dell said, patting his empty chest pocket. But first, we see the gear, the lasers. Nick led them to a crate covered in a greasy tarpaulin. With a flourish that sent his head flying, he pulled it back. Inside were rows of sleek, silver cylinders with blinking red lights. There they are, Nick whispered. Laser guided, high precision, straight from a high-tech facility in the north. Rodney leaned in, looking at a cylinder. Dell, these look like industrial barcode scanners. Shh, Dell hissed. They're diagnostic tools. Rodney, diagnostic. Nick, how many have you got? 50 units. Take him now for $5,000, and I'll throw in the cables. Dell looked at Rodney, his eyes wide with greed. Rodney, at $5,000, that's only £100 a unit. We sell 'em to a private clinic for $500 each, and we've wiped out half the debt in a weekend. Dell, we haven't got $5,000. Rodney cried. We have, if we use our contingency fund, Dell said, avoiding Rodney's gaze. You mean the money Raquel was saving for Damien's school uniform? It's an investment. Rodney, Damien will have a uniform made of gold by the time we're finished. Chapter 22, The Master's Pitch. Boyke sat in his garden, a glass of expensive-looking champagne in one hand and a cigar the size of a small tree in the other. He looked at Dell and Rodney as if they were a particularly unconvincing set of garden gnomes. So, Derek, Boyke drawled, his voice a nasal symphony of condescension. I hear you've been appearing on television. A very moving performance. I especially like the bit where you lost 50,000 pounds because you didn't know your classics. It was a technicality. Boyke, Dell shot back, trying to keep his cool. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about show business. I'm here to offer you a piece of the future. He opened a small briefcase to reveal one of the silver cylinders. Boyke leaned forward, squinting. And what exactly is this? A very expensive pencil case. It's a laser-guided pathological scanner. Boyke, Dell said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Straight from the R&D labs in Switzerland. It can detect anything from a common cold to a midlife crisis. Boyke picked it up, weighing it. It looks remarkably like a checkout scanner from a supermarket in Croydon. That's the clever part. Dell beamed. It's built into a familiar casing to prevent patient anxiety. High tech. Low stress. These are going to be in every private hospital in London by Christmas. I've got the exclusive distribution rights. Rodney cleared his throat. Well, technically, Trotter's Independent Traders is the sole procurement agent. Boyke let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like a seagull choking on a chip. Healthcare. Derek, you can't even diagnose a leak in your own radiator. I'm talking about the margins. Boyke, Dell urged. 30% return in 30 days. Guaranteed. Boyke put the cylinder back. I'll tell you what, Dell, I'll take 10 of them, at 100 quid each, not a penny more. Dell's face fell. 100? Boyke, I paid more than that myself. Then you're even more of a dipstick than I thought, Boyke said, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me, Marlene is calling. We're having a very expensive lunch. Chapter 23, The Laser Reveal. Back at the flat, the living room was filled with silver cylinders. Rodney was sitting on the floor, surrounded by instruction manuals that were written entirely in what appeared to be simplified Chinese. Dell, Rodney said, his voice trembling, I found the translation for the model number. Dell, who was busy trying to buff the Made in China stickers off the cylinders, didn't look up. And, does it say precision medical tool? No, Rodney said, standing up. It says industrial poultry sexer. Dell froze. A what? A poultry sexer. Dell, it's a laser tool used in high-speed chicken factories to determine if a chick is a boy or a girl. Dell stared at the cylinder in his hand. He pressed the button, and a tiny red laser beam shot out, hitting a picture of Uncle Albert on the wall. But it's laser-guided, Nick said. Nick is a common. Dell, we've spent Damien's uniform money on 50 machines that tell you if a chicken is a rooster. The silence in the flat was absolute. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of Raquel's keys in the door. Oh, no, Rodney whispered. Dell, if she sees these, she's going to sex us both with a rolling pin. Quick, under the sofa, Dell hissed. They spent the next 10 minutes frantically shoving silver cylinders under the furniture, just as Raquel walked in. Hello, boys, she said, looking around suspiciously. Why is everything moved? And why is there a red dot on Uncle Albert's nose? It's a new security system, sweetheart, Dell said, sweating. Trotter Tech Security. We're testing the perimeter. Raquel sighed. Dell, please tell me you haven't bought more junk. Junk? Raquel. This is the future. Chicken. I mean, security is the future. Chapter 24, Domestic Turbulence. The fallout from the laser deal was swift and painful. Raquel discovered the cylinders within 48 hours, mostly because the cat had learned how to trigger the lasers, turning the living room into a low-budget disco. 50 poultry sexers. Derek, Raquel yelled, her voice echoing through the tower block. We could have bought Damien a new wardrobe. We could have paid the rent for 3 months. It's an emerging market. Raquel, Dell pleaded, cowering behind the armchair. The organic chicken industry is booming. Everyone wants to know the gender of their poultry. Rodney was no help either. He had taken to wearing his Spartacus tunic around the flat as a form of silent protest. If anyone needs me, Rodney said, walking through the kitchen with a wooden spoon, I'll be in the Coliseum or the local job center. Oh, shut up, you tart, Del snapped, "I'm working on a pivot, a business pivot." He retreated to the balcony, the one place he could think. He looked out over Peckham and saw Boyke's Mercedes driving past far below. He knew Boyke was laughing at him. He knew everyone was. But as he looked at the silver cylinder in his hand, an idea began to form. It was a crazy idea, a stupid idea, a trotter idea. "Rodney," Del shouted, bursting back into the room, "I've got it. We don't sell M to farmers. We sell M to the entertainment industry." "The what?" "Laser tag, Rodney. We market M as pro-level laser tag kits for high-end corporate away days. We tell M it's a tactical training tool used by the SAS." Rodney looked at the poultry sexer. He looked at Del. For a second, a spark of the old madness returned to his eyes. Tactical training for corporate away days? Exactly. Trotter Tactical. It's a new branch of the company. Chapter 25. The Phoenix Prepares to Fly. It was Friday night at the Nag's Head. Del stood at the bar, a silver cylinder tucked into his waistband like a futuristic weapon. "All right, Trig," Del said, nodding at his friend. "All right, Del, what's that on your hip? A fancy new torch." "It's a tactical marking device, Trig," Del said, winking. "Standard issue for the elite squads. I'm organizing a tournament next weekend. 20 quid in entry. Winner gets a bottle of my finest champagne." "Sounds dangerous," Trigger said, looking impressed. "Can I be the referee?" "You're hired," Del beamed. He looked across the bar and saw Rodney talking to a group of young city types who had wandered in from the more gentrified parts of town. Rodney was gesturing wildly with an electronic personal organizer and a silver cylinder. "And the beauty of the Trotter tactical system," Rodney was saying, his voice filled with newfound confidence, "is the haptic feedback. It's so precise it's practically clinical." Del watched his brother and felt a surge of pride. They were back in the game. They weren't millionaires, yet they weren't even thousandaires, but the wheels were turning. The yellow van was still outside, the debt was still there, and they were still the Trotters. "I'll fetch the suitcase from the van," Del whispered to himself, a small, knowing smile on his face. Because in Peckham, the seasons might change and the tides might turn, but a Trotter always has one more card to play. "Mange tout, Rodney," Del muttered, raising his glass of cognac. "Mange tout." Chapter 26. The Peckham Open. The communal hallway of Nelson Mandela House had been transformed into what Del called an urban combat theater. In reality, it was a collection of empty cardboard boxes, discarded washing machines, and several miles of yellow tactical tape that Del had acquired from a confused road worker. "Right then, listen up," Del shouted, standing on a crate of bottled water. He was wearing a headband made from an old tie and a camouflage vest that was clearly 3 sizes too small. "Welcome to the inaugural Peckham Open. This is where the men are separated from the boys, and the boys are marked for life by high-intensity poultry sexing technology. The participants were a diverse group. There was Trigger, wearing a high-visibility jacket for no apparent reason, Denzel, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, Nicky Pierce, who had actually brought his own camouflage face paint, and 3 bewildered accountancy students that Rodney had lured in from the local library. The rules are simple, Rodney added, trying to maintain an air of professional authority despite the Spartacus tunic he was still stubbornly wearing. If you get hit by a laser, you're out. The scanner will emit a high-pitched beep to signify a confirmed mark. Actually, one of the students noted the device is emitting a chirping sound and the screen says pull it. That's a tactical code. Dell interjected quickly. Pull it means point under lethal laser engagement target. Now, let the games begin. He blew a whistle, and the hallway erupted into chaos. Trigger immediately took cover behind a recycling bin and accidentally scanned himself, resulting in a series of frantic beeps that informed the entire floor he was a great cockerel. Chapter 27, Friendly Fire. The battle raged for 30 minutes. Mickey Pierce was surprisingly agile, diving over boxes and tagging anyone who moved. However, the machine's original programming began to interfere with the combat simulation. Denzel yelled, pinned down behind a sofa. My gun keeps saying I'm underweight. It won't fire. Shake it, Denzel. It's the haptic feedback calibrating. Dell yelled back while trying to flank the accounting students. The chaos reached its peak when the hallway door opened and an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jittings, walked in carrying a bag of shopping. Excuse me, Derek, she said, looking at the camouflage-clad men rolling around on the floor. The lift is broken again. Not now, Mrs. Jittings. Dell hissed, peeking out from behind a washing machine. Can't you see we're in the middle of a high-stakes tactical exercise? Suddenly, a red laser dot appeared on Mrs. Jittings' forehead. Mickey Pierce had made his move. The device let out a triumphant chirp. Target identified, Mickey shouted. Confirmed mark. Mrs. Jittings looked at the screen of Mickey's device. It says ready for slaughter. What does that mean? Derek. It's a metaphor, Mrs. Jittings. Rodney cried, running over to apologize. It just means you've won the round. Congratulations. He frantically gestured for everyone to stop. The first Peckham Open had officially descended into a neighborhood relations disaster. Chapter 28, The Boyke Intervention. I must say, Derek, a familiar, mocking voice drawled from the entrance. The Sass really have let their standards slip. Boyke was standing at the edge of the theater, leaning against the doorframe and looking profoundly unimpressed. Beside him, Marlene was stifling a laugh. Ah, Boyke, Dell said, standing up and trying to look dignified while covered in dust and tactical tape. Good to see you. We're just finishing up a demonstration of the Trotter tactical system. High-level stuff. We've got interest from several private security firms. Boyke walked over to a discarded poultry sexer and picked it up. And how exactly is this supposed to secure anything other than a local supply of eggs? It's the psychological impact. Boyke, Dell insisted. The red dot, the chirping. It strikes fear into the hearts of the enemy. It strikes fear into the hearts of anyone with a basic understanding of electronics. Boyke laughed. I'll tell you what, Dell, I've got a lot of scrap metal at the yard. If you want to dump these there, I'll give you a $5 for the lot. A $5. Boyke, I've got 30 entries at 20 quid each. That's 600 pounds in one afternoon. Minus the cost of the tape, Rodney whispered, and the repairs to Mrs. Jitting's dignity. Ignore him, Dell snapped. The phoenix is rising. Boyke, whether you like it or not. Chapter 29, The Accounting. That night, the flat was quiet. The cardboard boxes had been cleared, and the poultry sexers were back under the sofa. Rodney sat at the table with the gold Rush 1-pound coin, spinning it slowly. 600 pounds, Dell, Rodney said. It's a start, but we still owe over 48,000. Dell sat across from him, sipping a glass of cheap brandy. He looked tired, but the spark in his eyes hadn't faded. Rome wasn't built in a day, Rodney, and the Trotter Empire won't be rebuilt in a weekend. But we're moving. We're trading. I was thinking about what you said on the balcony, Rodney said. About Mom. Do you really think she'd be proud of us, rolling around in a hallway with chicken grating machines? Dell looked at the picture of their mother on the mantelpiece. She'd be proud that we never gave up, Rodney. She knew what it was like to struggle. She knew that sometimes you have to be a bit creative to survive. He reached out and stopped the coin. It was heads. See, Dell smiled. The gods of commerce are smiling on us again. This time next year. Millionaires, Rodney finished for him. This time, he didn't say it with a sigh. He said it with a small, cautious hope. Chapter 30, Final Reflection. The yellow van sat in its usual spot outside Nelson Mandela House, a defiant splash of color against the gray concrete. It had survived the crash of the 90s, the loss of millions, and the indignity of being used to transport 50 poultry sexers. Inside the flat, Raquel was putting Damien to bed. Cassandra was finally laughing about the policewoman incident, and Dell was already planning a trip to a car boot sale in Margate. Life in Peckham wasn't easy. The bills were high, the lift was always broken, and the dreams were often larger than the reality. But as the sun set over the tower blocks, Derek Trotter stood on his balcony one more time. He felt the weight of the rings on his fingers and the history of his family in his heart. He knew the world would keep turning, the seasons would keep changing, and the tides would keep coming in. Kushti he whispered to the night. He turned back inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, because a trotter is never truly defeated. They are just preparing for the next big deal. And somewhere in the mystery of where it all comes from, the suitcase was already waiting in the van. Part 2, The Berman Siebling. Chapter 31, The Arrears and the Anguish. The following Monday dawned with a sky the color of a wet sidewalk. Del Boy sat at the breakfast table, staring into the middle distance, while a solitary piece of toast grew cold and stiff. The bankruptcy was no longer a fresh shock. It had become a dull, aching tooth. Rodney, Del said, his voice barely a rasp. Have you seen the latest from the water board? They're threatening to cut us off. They say our usage is excessive for a bankrupt household. Rodney walked in, fastening his tie. He was wearing his managing director suit, the one that fit a little too snugly in the shoulders and smelled faintly of mothballs. Del, the usage is excessive because you keep leaving the hot tap running to steam your silk shirts. We're supposed to be living within our means. Steam is essential for a professional appearance. Rodney. Del snapped. How am I supposed to secure international contracts if I look like I've just been pulled through a hedge backwards? Raquel entered the kitchen, holding a letter. Her expression was the one Del usually associated with an impending thunderstorm. Del, the bank. They've sent back your check for the nursery fees. It's marked refer to drawer. That's a technical error, Raquel. Del said quickly, standing up. I spoke to the manager only yesterday. He's a big fan of the show. He was probably just confused by the influx of capital. What capital? Del, Raquel asked, crossing her arms. The 40 pounds you made selling vintage umbrellas to the local primary school. It was 60 pounds. Del corrected. And it's a start. Now, don't you worry. I've got a meeting today. A big one. Something with a real sparkle. Chapter 32. A Call from the Past. The meeting was at the Nag's Head, which was currently serving as Del Boy's auxiliary office. He was sitting in the corner, nursing a half pint of Sid's cheapest lager, when the payphone in the corner rang. Sid looked over and nodded toward Del. It's for you, Derek. Sounds like Gentleman George. Del's heart skipped. Gentleman George was a man whose nickname was almost entirely ironic. He had been a semi-professional jeweler in the 70s, specializing in items that had a tendency to change ownership without the benefit of a receipt. George, Del said, grabbing the receiver, how's the world of precious stones treating you? Del Boy. George's voice was like gravel in a blender. I've heard you're looking for a way back to the top. I've got something. A retirement stash. Unregistered, unpolished, and currently sitting in a vault in Soho. Diamonds, Del whispered, his eyes widening. Better. Industrial diamonds. The kind they use in high-precision cutting tools. But these are special. They're high clarity, almost gemstone quality. The owner is a man who needs to liquidate his assets quickly before he moves to, let's say, a more tropical climate. And the price? 10 grand for a lot worth at least 50. But I need an answer by tomorrow, and I need a broker with a cleanish record. Dell looked at Rodney, who was currently trying to fix the jukebox by kicking it. I've got just the man, George, my managing director. He's got to GCEs and a brain like a diamond itself. We'll be in Soho by 3. Chapter 33, The Soho Connection. The Reliant Regal didn't so much drive to Soho as it groaned its way there, leaving a trail of blue smoke and disgruntled taxi drivers in its wake. Dell, if this is another Nervous Nick situation, I'm resigning, Rodney said, gripping the dashboard. Diamonds. In Soho. This has Interpol written all over it. Rodney, you have to think like a mogul. Dell yelled over the roar of the engine. This is how the big boys play. We buy the raw material, we find a cutter, and we sell the finished product to the elite. It's the circle of life. It's the circle of the exercise yard at Wormwood Scrubs. They arrived at a nondescript office above a shop that sold adult magazines and very specific types of leatherware. The sign on the door said H. Diamond, Gemological Consultant. Inside, the room was dimly lit and smelled of stale cigar smoke. A man with a face like a crumpled map and a suit that cost more than those van sat behind a massive mahogany desk. This was Diamond Harry. So, Harry said, his voice a smooth tenor, "You're the Trotters. I've heard you're creative. I like creativity. It's what built this city." He reached into his desk and pulled out a small, black velvet bag. With a practiced motion, he tipped the contents onto a white cloth. The stones were small, dull, and looked remarkably like pebbles from a driveway in Lewisham. "There they are," Harry said, "raw, unrefined potential. 50 units of the finest industrial-grade diamonds available in the Southeast." Chapter 34. Diamonds are a broker's best friend. Rodney leaned in, squinting at the stones. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a jeweler's loop that Dell had bought from a car boot sale in 1989. "Dell," Rodney whispered, "I'm not sure. They don't sparkle." "Of course they don't sparkle, you tart," Dell hissed. "They're raw. You have to cut them to get the fire. Harry, my managing director here is a specialist. He's checking the clarity." Harry watched Rodney with an amused expression. "Go ahead, son. Check the refraction. Check the density." Rodney held a stone up to the light. His GCEs, one of which was in art, were being pushed to their absolute limit. He remembered a documentary he'd seen on the Discovery Channel about diamond mining. The crystalline structure seems consistent, Rodney said, trying to sound like a man who spent his weekends in the vaults of De Beers. "But what about the provenance? Can we see the certification?" Harry let out a short, sharp laugh. Certification. Son, if these stones had certificates, they wouldn't be 10 grand. They'd be 50. You're buying the opportunity, not the paperwork. Dell stepped forward, his rings gleaming. We understand the risks, Harry. We're traders. We live on the edge. Give us 24 hours to assemble the capital. You have until midday tomorrow, Harry said, sweeping the stones back into the bag. After that, they go to a buyer from Antwerp, and he doesn't ask questions about GCEs. Chapter 35. The Valuation. Back in the van, the atmosphere was electric with a mixture of greed and terror. 10 grand, Dell. Rodney cried. Where are we going to get 10 grand? We haven't even got 10 pounds for the congestion charge. We've got the tactical money from the tournament, Dell said, his mind racing. And I can sell the rest of the poultry sexers to a contact in the Highlands. He says they're great for grading salmon. That's only a few grand. We're still 7 short. I'll talk to Boyke, Dell said, his jaw setting. Boyke, he'll want a pound of your flesh for every tenner. He'll want a piece of the action. Rodney, he's always wanted to get into the diamond trade. He's got the vault. He's got the contacts. We bring him in as a silent partner. Boyke, silent? Rodney laughed. He'll be telling everyone from here to Marbella that he's the Diamond King of Peckham before the sun goes down. Let him talk, Dell shouted, swerving the van around a bus. As long as he provides the readies. We're the brokers, Rodney. We're the brains. This is it. This is the big one, the Bermondsey-bling. As they rattled back toward Nelson Mandela House, Del Boy looked up at the gray London sky and saw only a glittering field of diamonds. He could almost feel the weight of the £1,000,000 check in his hand. Mange tout, Rodney, he whispered. Mange tout. Chapter 36. The King of the Car Lot. Boyke's residence, the Chestnuts, stood as a monument to 80s aspiration and questionable architectural choices. It was the kind of house that didn't just have a gravel driveway. It had gravel that was polished daily by a man who was terrified of Boyke's laugh. Dell and Rodney stood at the front door, Rodney checking his reflection in a brass knocker that was shaped like a lion with an identity crisis. Remember, Rodney, Dell whispered, straightening his tie. We're not begging. We're offering an unprecedented investment opportunity. We're the conduits of wealth. The door was opened by Marlene, who was wearing a tracksuit that had enough sequins to blind a low-flying pilot. Dell, Rodney, come in. Boyke's in the library. He's currently reading a catalog of solid gold bidets. They were led into a room filled with leather-bound books that Boyke had clearly bought by the yard. Boyke was sitting behind a desk, looking like a man who had successfully privatized his own soul. Derek, Rodney, Boyke drawled, not looking up. I assume you're here about the poultry sexers. I've had 3 complaints from the SAS. Apparently, The haptic feedback turned out to be a short circuit that gave Mickey Piers a permanent twitch. Ignore Mickey, Boyke, he's high-strung, Dell said, sitting down uninvited. We're here about something much more. Refined, diamonds, industrial grade, high-clarity stones from a private vault in Soho. Boyke finally looked up, a flicker of interest behind his cold, calculating eyes. Diamonds, you say. And let me guess, you need a small capital injection to secure the lot? We need $7,000, Boyke, Dell said, leaning in. For a 50% stake in a lot worth $50,000. Guaranteed return in 30 days. You provide the vault and the cash. We provide the expertise and the Soho connection. Boyke let out a long, nasal whistle. 50%, Derek, for $7,000. You must be even more desperate than the water board thinks you are. It's a partnership, Boyke. Dell insisted. The Bermondsey Peckham Syndicate. Think of the prestige. I'm thinking of the profit, Boyke said, standing up. All right, Derek, I'll provide the cash, but I want 60%. And if this goes south, I'm taking the yellow van as collateral. I've always wanted a mobile chicken grading facility. Dell swallowed hard. He looked at Rodney, who was staring at a globe on the desk. 60%. Boyke, that's highway robbery. Take it or leave it. Derek, the Antwerp buyer is waiting. Dell took a deep breath. All right, 60%. Deal. Chapter 37. A Highland Fling. The final $3,000 was harder to come by. Dell had spent the entire morning on the phone to a man in the Scottish Highlands named Big Angus, who owned a salmon farm and a very large collection of kilts. Angus, my old friend, Dell shouted into the receiver. I've got exactly what you need. 50 state-of-the-art diagnostic marking devices. Perfect for grading salmon by weight and gender without even touching them. It's the organic revolution. Gender of a salmon. Derek. Angus's voice boomed back. Why the hell would I care if a fish is a laddie or a lassie before I smoke it? Market segmentation. Angus. You can sell gentlemen's smoked salmon for double the price. It's a niche market in London. Every high-end deli in Chelsea is screaming for it. And they're laser-guided. Laser-guided and haptic responsive. You'll be the king of the loch. 2 hours of frantic negotiation later, and Angus had agreed to buy the remaining poultry sectors for £3,000 provided Dell could get them to the freight depot by sunset. Rodney, get the van, Dell yelled, slamming the phone down. We're heading for the depot. The Phoenix is about to do a bit of fly fishing. They raced through the streets of Peckham, the yellow van leaning dangerously as they took corners. The 50 cylinders were rattling in the back like a frantic, silver percussion section. Dell, what if Angus finds out they're for chickens? Rodney shouted over the wind. By the time he finds out, we'll be diamond moguls. Rodney. We'll buy him a whole new lock. Just keep driving. Chapter 38, The Soho Shakedown. The midday sun was beating down on Soho as the Trotters and Boyke, who had insisted on coming along to protect his investment, stood outside the office of Harry Diamond. Boyke looked like a man who was allergic to anything that didn't have a manicured lawn. "This is it, Derek?" Boyke asked, looking at the adult magazine shop. "Your International Gemological Center looks remarkably like a fire hazard." "It's about discretion, Boyke," Dell whispered. "High-value deals don't happen in the window of Selfridge's." They climbed the stairs and entered Harry's office. The air was even thicker with cigar smoke. Harry looked at the suitcase Boyke was carrying with a predatory grin. "The capital?" Harry asked. "10 grand. In used 20s, Boyke said, placing the case on the desk. "But before we open it, I want to see the stones, and I want them verified by my own expert." He nodded toward Rodney, who pulled out the jeweler's loop with a trembling hand. Harry tipped the bag onto the cloth. The 50 stones tumbled out, looking as dull and unimpressive as before. Rodney picked one up, his heart pounding. He looked through the loop. The crystalline structure is still consistent, Rodney said, his voice cracking. "It's definitely diamond. Or at least, it's not plastic." "Good enough for me," Harry said, grabbing the suitcase. He handed the black velvet bag to Dell. "The stones are yours. The Antwerp buyer is going to be very disappointed." "He who dares wins, Harry." Dell beamed, clutching the bag to his chest. As they walked back down the stairs, Boyke was already calculating his 60%. "I want these in my vault by 5, Derek, and I've already contacted a cutter in Hatton Garden. We start the process tomorrow." "Peckham's finest, Boyke." Dell laughed. "We're back." Chapter 39, Glass or Class. The Hatton Garden workshop was a cramped, brightly lit room filled with the sound of grinding wheels and the smell of industrial lubricant. The cutter, a man named Mr. Levy, who had seen more diamonds than a Belgian bank, sat at his bench, looking at the 50 stones. Dell, Rodney, and Boyke stood behind him, their breath held. "So, Mr. Levy," Boyke said, his voice dripping with anticipation, "what do we have? High clarity, gemstone potential." Mr. Levy picked up a stone, looked at it for 3 seconds, and then let out a sigh that seemed to last for a lifetime. "What?" Dell asked, his smile faltering. "What is it?" "These stones," Mr. Levy said, placing the pebble back on the cloth. "They are indeed industrial-grade diamonds. Very high clarity, as you said." "See!" Dell shouted, slapping Rodney on the back. "I told you." "But," Mr. Levy continued, "they are a very specific type of industrial diamond. They are spent diamonds, recovered from the bits of heavy-duty tunneling machines used in the construction of the Channel Tunnel." "Spent?" Boyke asked, his voice rising in an octave of pure dread. "Yes, The heat and pressure of the drilling has caused internal fractures at a molecular level. They are practically worthless. If I tried to cut them, they would simply disintegrate into dust. They are only good for being ground down into abrasive powder for sandpaper. Sandpaper, Rodney whispered. The lot is worth maybe 50 pounds for a very large box of high-quality grit. The silence in the workshop was absolute. Even the grinding wheels seemed to go quiet in sympathy. Boyke turned to Dell, his face a mask of cold, concentrated fury. Sandpaper, Derek, you've spent 7 grand of my money on 50 pounds worth of grit. I didn't know about the molecular fractures. Boyke, Dell stammered, backing away. Harry Diamond said, Harry Diamond is currently halfway to Spain with my used 20s. Boyke yelled, I want the van. Derek, I want the van, and I want the poultry sexers back from Scotland. I can't get M back. Boyke, Angus has already started gender grading his salmon. Chapter 40, The Peckham Resilience. An hour later, Dell and Rodney sat in the corner of the Nag's Head. The yellow van was still outside. Boyke had decided that even as a chicken grader, it was more trouble than it was worth. He had settled for those contingency fund and a promise of 80% of all future profits until the debt was cleared. Sandpaper, Dell, Rodney said, staring into his beer, were the only businessmen in history who could buy 50 grand worth of diamonds and end up with a box of grit. Dell sat there, looking at the black velvet bag. He reached in and pulled out a handful of the dull, gray stones. It's not grit, Rodney, Dell said. His voice regained some of its old, gravelly charm. It's high-performance abrasive material. Think about it. Every workshop in London needs sandpaper. Every decorator, every carpenter. They're all screaming for quality grit. Rodney looked at him, his mouth agape. Dell, you're not planning to sell sandpaper, are you? Schroeder's Professional Abrasives, Dell said, his eyes beginning to sparkle again. We market it as diamond-infused surface refiner. We charge triple the price. It's the latest trend in interior design. He stood up, smoothing his waistcoat. Sid, a round for my friends. On Rodney's tab. Dell, Rodney yelled. I haven't got a tab. I'm the managing director of a sandpaper company. Details, Rodney, details. Dell laughed, heading for the bar. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. Kushti. And as the jukebox in the corner began to play a familiar tune about changing seasons and tides of the sea, the brothers sat together in the heart of Peckham Bankrupt, gritty, but eternally, hopelessly undefeated. Part 3, The Peckham Spring. Chapter 41, The Sahara in South London. The following week, London was gripped by a heat wave so intense it felt like someone had accidentally left the oven door open on the entire city. The tarmac on the Peckham High Street was tacky, the birds had stopped singing, to conserve moisture, and the residents of Nelson Mandela House were discovering that tower blocks were essentially giant concrete radiators. In the Trotter kitchen, Del Boy was attempting to create a tropical breeze using a handheld battery-powered fan and a bowl of lukewarm water. He was wearing his trademark soap bathrobe, which was currently plastered to his back. "Rodney," Del croaked, "have you called the water board? This trickle in the tap wouldn't satisfy a thirsty hamster." Rodney appeared in the doorway, looking remarkably like a wilted celery stick. "They're not interested. Del, there's a Hosepite ban, a reservoir warning, and apparently our specific pipe has a pressure anomaly." "Anomaly? I'll give them an anomaly." Del snapped. "We pay our rates." "Well, we're scheduled to pay our rates, and we deserve a decent flow." Raquel entered, fanning herself with a bill. "Del, the water board says if we don't pay the arrears by Friday, the trickle will become a halt. They're serious this time." Del stared at the dripping tap. A drop fell, plink, then another, plonk. "Rodney," Del said, his voice dropping into that dangerous, visionary tone that usually preceded a disaster. "How much is a bottle of Perrier these days?" "About $1.50 for a small one." "Why?" "And people pay it, willingly, for water that's just been sitting in a mountain for 1,000 years? It's filtered through limestone, Del. It's pure." Del walked over to the window and looked out at the parched estate. He then looked at the garage area far below. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. "Limestone, eh? Rodney, get the van. We're going to find ourselves a mountain." Chapter 42. The Revelation in the Garage. The Trotter family garage was a dark, damp cavern filled with the ghosts of failed business ventures. There were still a few broken umbrellas, a box of diamond-infused sandpaper, and a lingering smell of poultry. "What are we doing here, Del?" Rodney asked, coughing as a cloud of dust settled on his shirt. "It's 10 degrees hotter in here than it is outside." Del was busy moving a stack of old tires in the far corner. "Shh, listen." Rodney went quiet. Beneath the floorboards, there was a distinct, rhythmic sound. Gurgle, splash, gurgle. "It's the main pipe, Del," Rodney said flatly. "The one for the whole block. It runs right under here." "No, Rodney," Del said, pointing at a small patch of dampness on the concrete floor where a clear liquid was bubbling up through a crack. "That is not a pipe. That is a natural spring, a miracle of geology, right here in the heart of Peckham. It's a leak. Del, the council has been trying to find it for 3 months. Think about it, Rodney. This water has been filtered through the finest Victorian brickwork and the rich, mineral-laden soil of South London. It's probably got more vitamins in it than a bowl of muesli." Del dipped his finger into the puddle and tasted it. He grimaced for a split second, a hint of rust, and something suspiciously like washing up liquid before his face transformed into a mask of pure marketing genius. Exquisite, refreshing. It's got a bouquet, a certain jhene says koi. It's got a certain cholera, Dell, Rodney shouted. Nonsense. It's a gold mine. We bottle it, we label it, and we sell it to the thirsty masses. We'll call it the Peckham Spring. Chapter 43, The Bottling Plant. For the next 48 hours, the garage was transformed into a high-speed production facility. Dell had acquired 500 empty glass bottles from a contact at a recycling center, or, as he called it, a glassware procurement specialist. Rodney was tasked with the purification process. This involved running the water through an old coffee filter and a pair of Raquel's discarded tights. Dell, this is highly illegal, Rodney whispered, nervously looking out the garage door for any sign of a council inspector. We're selling tap water well, leak water as mineral water. It's environmentally reclaimed water, Rodney, Dell corrected, as he slapped labels onto the bottles. The labels featured a picture of a mountain range which looked suspiciously like the Swiss Alps and the words, Peckham Spring, naturally filtered by time. Where did you get the mountains from? Dell. It's a metaphor, Rodney. It represents the height of quality we're aiming for. Now, keep filtering. We've got a delivery to make to the Nag's Head by lunch. Dell picked up a finished bottle and held it to the light. There were a few specks of grit at the bottom, which he quickly shook until they disappeared into the cloudy depths. See that? That's the Mother Earth sediment. People love that. It proves it's authentic. Chapter 44, The Marketing Blitz. The Nag's Head was packed with people who looked like they were ready to trade their firstborn children for a cold drink. The pub's ice machine had broken down, and Sid was serving beer that was the temperature of hot soup. Dell burst through the doors, carrying 2 crates of Peckham Spring. Don't panic, everyone. The savior of Peckham has arrived, Dell shouted, his voice cutting through the humid air. Trigger looked up from his spot. All right, Dell, what you got there? Gin. Better than gin. Trig, it's the Peckham Spring, the water of life, bottled at the source, untouched by human hands. Mostly. Sid leaned over the bar, skeptical. Water? Dell, I've got water in the tap. Ah, but do you have this water? Sid. Dell opened a bottle with a flourish and handed it to a sweating businessman at a nearby table. Taste that, sir. Tell me it doesn't transport you to a mountain meadow. The man took a long swig. He blinked. It's remarkably cold. That's because it's been stored in a subterranean vault. Dell lied it had been in the back of the van with a bag of frozen peas. To quit a bottle. Special introductory offer for the local community. Within 10 minutes, the first crate was gone. At £2 a bottle, Dell had made 40 pounds in pure profit, or rather, pure theft. See, Rodney, Del whispered as they headed back to the van, "The people are crying out for quality. They're crying out for the Trotter touch." Chapter 45, The Bubble Bursts. The success of the Peckham Spring lasted exactly 3 hours. By mid-afternoon, the first reports began to filter back to the Nag's Head. Mickey Pierce had developed a sudden and intense interest in the pub's restroom facilities. Denzel claimed his teeth felt unusually furry, and the businessman who had taken the first swig had returned to the pub, looking remarkably green. "Del," Sid yelled, as the yellow van pulled up outside for the second delivery. "Get in here." Del walked in, looking like a man who was about to be awarded the Nobel Prize for hydration. "All right, Sid, ready for the next shipment?" "The next shipment is going in the bin." "Del." Sid slammed a half-empty bottle onto the bar. "People are getting sick. Look at the color of this." Del squinted at the bottle. In the bright light of the afternoon sun, the water had turned a faint, sickly shade of yellow. "That's just the sun reacting with the minerals, Sid. It's like liquid gold. It's like liquid sewage." "Del," Rodney cried, appearing behind him. "I told you we should have boiled it." Suddenly, the pub door swung open and 2 men in suits walked in. They were carrying clipboards and looking very official. "Is there a Derek Trotter on the premises?" one of them asked. Del's smile vanished. "Depends who's asking. If it's the lottery, yes. If it's the police, I'm his twin brother, Gary." "We're from the Water Authority," the man said. "We've been tracking a major leak in the Nelson Mandela House area for months. We've just discovered that someone has been tapping the main line and, according to local reports, bottling it." The silence in the Nag's Head was absolute. Trigger finally spoke up. "I think he's in the van. Dave," Trigger said, pointing at Rodney. "It's Rodney. Trig," Rodney yelled, as he and Del turned and bolted for the exit. Chapter 46, The Aftermath. Back in the flat, the mood was somber. The Peckham Spring labels had been burned in the kitchen bin, and the remaining bottles had been emptied down the drain, ironically returning the water to the authority from whence it came. "They're going to fine us, Del," Rodney said, sitting with his head in his hands. "They're going to fine us and probably throw us in a reservoir. They have to prove it was us first, Rodney," Del said, though his bravado was paper thin. "It could have been anyone. There are hundreds of people in this block with a basic knowledge of plumbing and a lack of moral fiber." Raquel entered the room, looking surprisingly calm. The water board called, "Del." "And they said they fixed the leak. And because we reported it." "Well, because I reported it this morning while you were at the office. They've decided to waive the arrears as a thank you for our civic duty." Del froze. He looked at Raquel, then at Rodney, then at the ceiling. "Waive the arrears." Del's voice rose in a crescendo of disbelief. £48,000? "No." Del, Raquel sighed. the 80 pounds we owed for this month. The 48,000 is still very much there. Dell slumped into his armchair. He felt the familiar weight of failure, but also the tiny, flickering spark of a survivor. Well, Dell muttered, "It's a start. We're 80 quid up, and we've still got the diamond sandpaper." Rodney looked at his brother. He shook his head and let out a long, weary sigh. "This time next year, Dell." Dell looked out the window at the setting London sun, his rings catching the light one last time today. "No, Rodney, this time next month. I've got a feeling about those vintage fire extinguishers I saw in the paper. Mange tout, Rodney. Mange tout. Part